Good morning and welcome to Morning Scoop for Tuesday, June 28th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 67 days, the game against Michigan in 151 days. Ohio State just wrapped up one of the biggest recruiting weekends of the year, and so the June visit period comes to a close. Now it's time to find out if any of those visits are going to turn into any commitments anytime soon. My guest today is Alex Gleitman. He is the host of the Around the Oval podcast and the author of the ADEC column. He talked to a number of players who were in town for official visits this weekend. He's here to share what he learned. Alex, thanks for being here.
Yeah, Tom, always a pleasure. It's been a marathon of a month on the recruiting front, but glad for a little bit of a break and well, at least a little bit. There could be some good news coming soon for Ohio State fans. So we're buckling up, but glad to take at least a day to take a deep sigh of this is over. So it's been fun though.
Yeah, and when you say there could be news coming soon, we mean there is a piece of news that has not happened as of the time we're recording, but it potentially could happen by the time you're listening to this. That is cornerback Cain Lee. He is a four-star cornerback out of the state of Georgia. It is possible that by the time you're listening to this, he has committed. He's certainly on, safe to say he's on commitment watch. If he has committed, Tony Girdham and I will have a whole episode, instant reaction episode of the Buckeye Weekly podcast talking all about him. But for now, just as long as, before he is potential commitment, Kayin Lee, tell us about weekend visitor and cornerback prospect, Kayin Lee.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a kid who's been top of the board for Ohio State for, pretty much a year, maybe a little bit over a year now. Since he visited last summer, I think Ohio State's felt really good about him. I know he's liked Ohio State a lot. He committed to Georgia, backed off that commitment once there was a change with their defensive back coach there, and I think that opened the door for Ohio State. I think they've been the favorite ever since then, and he had a great official visit this past weekend. And as we said, by the time you're listening to this, he may very well be committed, and I think if that is the case, it will be to Ohio State. So I feel pretty good about Kayin Lee. All the intel points to Ohio State being the team to beat for a while, and as long as they can, as long as nothing goes crazy at the last minute, I would expect him to be a Buckeye, whether it's already happened or it will happen in the very near future.
And he may not be the only one who is on commitment watch this week. There's two other players who have commitments set for later on in the week. Jermaine Matthews, who's a four-star cornerback out of Winton Woods. That's the same program that produced Mayan Williams. And he's committing on July 1st, so that's Friday. Darron Reed, four-star defensive lineman out of Columbus, Georgia. He's committing on July 4th. If I set, Alex, the over-under of 1.5 commitments between those two guys to Ohio State, are you going over or under that number for the Buckeyes?
In the next week,
Well, they both have announcements set, so
yeah, I mean, I think it's over. I think Jermaine Matthews. I don't think Ohio State would have made the offer if they didn't feel good about that one. And Darron Reed, as I posted on the board already. I mean, my intel, and then further my A deck, commented on that. I feel really good coming out of this visit. I know that there was some smoke about LSU a few weeks back, but I feel really good about where Ohio State stands, and I think with the July 4th commitment on tap, that if the number's 1.5, I got to go over there.
well, I mean, it feels like it was only a week or so ago that people were talking about the fact that, well, yes, Ohio State's recruiting very well on the offensive side of the ball, but on defense they only have three commitments or something like that. So you could potentially see that number double by the time we're shooting off fireworks next Monday. And there are other potential targets on that defensive side of the ball who were visiting over the weekend as well. Very, very big targets. Let's start with a couple linebackers. First of all, Tackett Curtis. Once again, another guy out of the South. He's out of Louisiana. We've talked about a couple Georgia guys here. Now someone out of Louisiana. How did Tackett Curtis's visit go? Because you've talked about Kayin Lee being kind of top of the board. I know Tackett Curtis is right near the top of their board at linebacker as well. How did his visit go, and where do things stand with him right now?
Yeah, I think it was a great visit. I've had Ohio State as the leader since he made the first visit a few months back, and I just I think there's been smoke about USC. There's been smoke about Wisconsin. I mean, I guess you could never be surprised in recruiting, but Jim Knowles has made Tackett Curtis and his family a priority since day one. He took the job. It was his first stop was down to Louisiana to see Tackett. I think, the pitch of him and his defense being all over the place, making plays, being that perfect linebacker for his system, seeing how well some of the linebackers did in that defense last year. I just think they have done an excellent job with Tackett Curtis, and I would be pretty surprised if and when he. I think he's going to make his decision in the fairly near future. I think it's going to be sometime in the month of July, and I think I would be pretty surprised if it's not Ohio State.
Well, and there's another linebacker also out of the South, also a very, very highly sought after linebacker, Troy Bowles. He's someone who we saw at camp last year, just visited again. He's someone, another person where there's been some kind of rumbles that maybe he's looking somewhere else, or maybe Ohio State's kind of falling out of the picture there. He had an official visit over the weekend. How did that go? And are the Buckeyes still kind of in that picture for Troy Bowles moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think they are absolutely. I kind of thought that they faded with the coaching staff change. We hadn't seen a visit in a while. We hadn't really heard from Troy. I think we just didn't know what the situation was. But I had someone must have been back in like March tell me that they still felt Ohio State had a great shot at Troy Bowles. They felt it was Ohio State and Georgia. That has pretty much been the intel. I mean, I know Oklahoma also got an official visit, but those Oklahoma, Georgia, Ohio State are the only three programs that have gotten official visits thus far, and may only get official visits. And that's been the intel. It's really just been Ohio State and Georgia at the top. I think Mark and Kevin felt that way when they went down to see Troy down in Florida, and so in talking with some Ohio State people, they felt like almost like a cautious optimism around Troy after this weekend. I think some more neutral, non-Ohio State people felt like Georgia still had the edge and was the team to beat. But what I'll say is I spoke to the same source who told me back in late March that Ohio State was absolutely a player in this one, and they think Ohio State is going to get Troy Bowles. So I said in my A deck, I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb versus maybe the public here and say that I'm going to predict Ohio State lands Troy Bowles in somewhat of an upset. Um, but I'm trying to dig in on that one more just because I think that there's more intel there that I'm not fully in on, and I want to be 1,000% sure. But right now, I'm okay going out on the limb, and if I'm wrong, it happens. Hopefully not often. I don't think it does, but um, no one bats 1,000. But I'm gonna go out on a limb and say I think Ohio State is in good position with Troy Bowles right now.
All right, and the theme of this show, if you haven't picked it up, is Ohio State chasing really, really good defensive players in the Deep South. One more, Caleb Downs, safety. He is someone who is a five-star prospect. He visited over the weekend. He again, just like a lot of these guys we're talking about, right at the top of the board. They are looking at a very big defensive back class. How many? First of all, let's talk about Caleb Downs. Where does things stand with Caleb Downs after that visit? And then how big? I mean, you've heard 3, 4 names at corner. You've heard 3, 4 names at safety. How big is this defensive back class going to end up?
I didn't think it was going to get this far, but I think it could get to 8. I think they could take 4 safeties and 4 cornerbacks. We talked about Cain Lee. They obviously have Dijon Johnson in the hopper. We talked about Jermaine Matthews and, Calvin Simpson Hunt. I wasn't sure if he was a taker. He took his official visit last weekend. I think after that, I reported, in my story after doing some research, I think he is a taker. And so I can see them getting those 4 guys at cornerback. And then at safety, I mean, you got Malik Hartford and Cedric Hawkins in the hopper. I think they're in pretty good position for Jaden Bonsu, and I know that they would take him. If not, I mean, Damon Fagan's absolutely a strong possibility. And, Caleb Downs, I have Ohio State as the leader for Caleb Downs right now. I know there's been smoke about Alabama and some about Georgia, and I just think that Ohio State, everything I hear points to Ohio State eventually landing Caleb Downs, and I don't think this is a kid who wants to drag it out. So I think we could find out in the next month. And there's your 4 safeties and there's your 4 cornerbacks. So that's 8. And given that they're going to be playing 5 defensive backs on the field pretty much all the time, it's not that crazy, especially when you think about Cam Brown probably being gone after this year, Denzel Burke, probably being gone after next year. Jordan Hancock and J.K. Johnson could be gone after next year, at least one of them if they have a good year. And they lost Legend Cavazos, they lost Ryan Watts. The numbers aren't really that. They only took 1 corner last year, so in Ryan Turner, and so I think that they could be looking to restock that room. And I think when you look at the safety talent, Tanner McAllister's gone after this year, Josh Proctor's gone after this year. Ronnie Hickman could be gone after this year. If not, definitely after next year. So they definitely need to restock the talent in the room, overall, corner and safety. And so when you think about it like that, taking 8 in this class really isn't that crazy.
Well, we just talked about the fact that a week ago everyone was worried that they weren't getting any defensive commitments, and where are the defensive commitments? So, okay, hopefully everyone's feeling a little bit better about where things maybe stand with on the defensive side of the ball. So now, Alex, it's time to panic about offensive line recruiting. So why don't you, they just had another very big target in, an overseas target, Olaf Linen. He was in over the weekend. They've obviously got the three in-state guys: Montgomery, Padilla, and Sirveld. Where does Olaf Linen fit in potentially with that group, and is he, where do things stand with him coming off of that visit?
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy they want to finish off that class. I mean, maybe if they no pun intended there. But maybe if they take 5, there's a Jordan Hall in Columbus, a more project type kid, or maybe they're somehow able to get a Samson Okunlola, one of the big fish like that on campus. But I think Olas is the highest ranked guy that they felt that they've had the best chance at for a while. He's been a priority for Justin Fry. He plays at Loomis Chaffee in Connecticut, and Fry has stopped there multiple times. Ryan Day, obviously from the New England area, that certainly helps a little bit too. But Ohio State has pulled out all the stops. He had a great unofficial visit a few months back. I've been hearing for a while Ohio State, Alabama. I know some people have talked about Miami recently as kind of having a really strong official visit and being in the mix, but I just have, no like solid intel saying he's going to Ohio State, but just kind of reading the tea leaves, talking to the kid, his family, um, talking to sources at Ohio State, out here on the East Coast with Loomis Chaffee. I just think that Ohio State has a great shot at this one, and I think that they've done everything that they need to do to land his commitment, and I think if I had a crystal ball or futurecast or recruitment prediction machine selection, I would be picking Ohio State if I had to make a pick today.
Well, those are just some of the guys that Alex wrote about in this week's ADAC column. You can find the full column, including several other players of note, on the Ask the Insiders Board of Buckeye Scoop. You can also check out his Around the Oval podcast, which is always a fantastic listen. That's one that's worth subscribing to. Kevin Noon does the Big Meat Kickoff. That's worth subscribing to. Mark Givler and the Build a Bank Green do the Gives in the Bank podcast. That's worth subscribing to. Tony Gerdeman and I do Buckeye Weekly. I'm not going to ask you to subscribe to that because I listen to it too, but you can definitely hear a commitment podcast whenever Cain Lee does in fact commit to Ohio State. If that happens this week, we'll have an instant reaction show there. So at least check it out for that. And if you want to subscribe, that's on you. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.